Hitler had a real plan to invade America and turn it into Nazi-occupied territory. Mass arrests, racial laws, and a holocaust on U.S. soil. This wasn't just theory. There were real Nazi blueprints for what to do with the United States. Here's what would have happened if Germany won the war. December 11, 1941, just 4 days after Pearl Harbor. Hitler goes to the Reichstag and delivers a speech that changes everything. He blames the eternal Jew, says Roosevelt, and America spent years plotting against Germany, and announces that Germany is at war with the United States. He's not hiding anything. He straight up claims the U.S. government is under Jewish control and that everything Germany's doing is self-defense. He promises Germany, Italy, and Japan will throw everything they have at America and Britain, and they'll win, no matter what it takes. Hitler's obsession with the U.S. didn't come out of nowhere. He'd been fixated on America since the late 1920s. In the unpublished sequel to his book, Hitler's already calling the U.S. an expansionist power, worrying about a future where America and Europe team up and Germany gets left behind. He's thinking in terms of living space, Lebensraum. That whole idea, the Nazis used it to justify war, land grabs, and genocide. Hitler's paranoia about U.S. power started early. Fast forward to July 1941. Hitler meets Japanese ambassador Hiroshi Oshima and spells it out. America's pushing into both European and Asian territory, trying to muscle into Lebensraum. He puts Germany and Japan on the same side against the U.S. and Russia, says they both face imperialist threats. The record from that meeting has Hitler insisting that the only option is to annihilate America and Russia together. Not just rhetoric, this is what he's actually telling allies behind closed doors. Even after the declaration of war, Hitler can't ignore what the U.S. is. He talks about American industry, the way the country uses technology, and the sheer scale of its economy. He knew exactly what he was up against. Originally, Hitler took the U.S. seriously, a big, dangerous rival. By the 1930s, he changed his tune. Now it's all about racial mixing ruining America, about how diversity has made the country weak, the economy broken, and the culture worthless. He claims America's finished, a mess, easy to beat, typical Nazi projection. Meanwhile, jazz is huge in Germany. Nazi officials whine about it, try to ban it, but it's everywhere. Not everyone bought into Hitler's line. Still, they watched America's numbers. Hitler wrote that the U.S. economy was massive, big enough to handle shocks, and might even get stronger. So for all the Nazi trash talk, they never stopped watching or worrying. Here's where it gets ugly. The Nazis looked at the U.S. and saw stuff they wanted to copy. Jim Crow laws, segregation, anti-miscegenation rules. They used these American laws as case studies for Nazis. The Nuremberg laws were inspired by U.S. policies. Stripping citizenship, banning who you can marry, deciding who counts by race, they learned from American law books. Nazis even studied how some U.S. states threatened anyone who married across racial lines, and they wrote similar rules targeting Jewish people. They looked at the one-drop rule in the U.S. If you had any black ancestry, that was it, you were considered black. Even the Nazis saw how extreme that was, but they still copied the logic, just adjusted it to their own racist obsessions. And if you think this was all theory, think again. There's a book kept today in Library and Archives Canada that the Nazis commissioned. Title translates to Statistics, Press, and Organizations of Jewry in the United States and Canada. This book lists out the Jewish populations in cities big and small all over North America. This is the kind of groundwork the Nazis used in Europe before the Holocaust, mapping out where people lived, collecting data, getting ready for something worse. It doesn't spell out a genocide plan in so many words, but anyone who knows the history can see what's happening here. Michael Kent, a curator at Library and Archives Canada, put it bluntly. The Holocaust wasn't a European event. It was an event that didn't have the opportunity to spread out of Europe. This was the plan. If Nazi Germany had taken control here, the machinery of genocide was ready to roll. So, what did Hitler actually want for America if things went his way? There's no single plan written down, but there's this idea historians call the Stufan plan, the stepping plan. No Nazi official called it that out loud, but the signs are all there. The Nazis wanted to take over territory in stages, building a massive European empire, and sooner or later, that meant a confrontation with the United States. Hitler saw it coming as early as the late 1920s. In his unpublished second book, he basically admits Germany would have to fight the U.S. eventually. That document sat in a vault until it was finally published in 1961, but the ideas were there from the start. Still, it's important to remember Nazi policy could turn on a dime, and Hitler was never a strategic mastermind. So putting weight on one old manuscript can only go so far. But if the Nazi Empire got as big as he dreamed, a war with America was on the table. Most people know how much Britain and Germany hated each other during the war. Bombings, blockades, London burning during the Blitz. But deep down, Hitler had these weird hopes for a future where, after Germany took control, Britain would eventually join him against America. In September 1941, he said outright, "I will not live to see it, but I am happy for the German folk that it will one day witness how Germany and England united will line up against America." The next year, he pushed the same idea again, saying, "One day England will be obliged to make approaches to the continent, and it will be a German-British army that will chase the Americans from Iceland." All of this comes straight from Hitler's own speeches and conversations. The logic was never really there. Britain was already allied with the U.S., already fighting Germany, but this is what he kept telling his people. One of the most concrete Nazi ambitions was the plan to bomb America. Getting across the ocean was a massive problem. Germany's Navy and Air Force couldn't reach that far. So by 1940, Hitler ordered the development of a long-range plane, the so-called America bomber. The original plan was to fly from the Azores, which belonged to Portugal, a country friendly to Germany at the time. But by 1943, the Allies had a base there, and that idea collapsed. German engineers scrambled for other options, but nothing ever worked. Even if they'd pulled it off, they could only deliver a single bomb, a real disaster if it hit a big city, but not enough to bring the U.S. to its knees. Because of the chaos at the end of the war, it's still tough to track exactly what was built, but most people believe the Messerschmitt Me-264 was the main result of all that effort. Hitler's obsession went even further. By the end of the war, he talked about burning New York City to the ground in a firestorm. Albert Speer, one of Hitler's closest insiders, described how Hitler imagined the skyscrapers turning into torches, collapsing into each other, the whole city lighting up the sky. He wanted a giant 4-engine bomber to fly the Atlantic and get revenge for the bombing of Germany. None of it ever happened. While engineers were trying to build bombers, other Nazi planners were thinking about battleships, specifically warships that could stand up to the U.S. Navy in a fight. That meant going bigger than anything America or Japan had ever built. These were the H-class battleships, and at the top of the list was the H-44, a 140,000-ton monster with 8 20-inch guns. If that ever made it across the Atlantic, any American ship would be in real trouble. There's hard evidence that some H-class ships actually started construction, but none ever got finished. Both were scrapped in the shipyards before they could even hit the water. Like the America bomber, these super-battleships ended up as a waste of time, resources, and manpower, projects that sucked up money while the real war kept closing in. Hitler was never stupid. He understood just how hard it would be to occupy the U.S. physically, but he did look for other ways to hit the Americans, especially through economic warfare. In a 1941 interview, Life magazine's John Cudahy brought up the idea that Germany could wreck the U.S. economy if it won. Cudahy thought German workers lived under tough conditions and that U.S. labor would never put up with it. Hitler disagreed. He claimed Germans had it better than people said, and anyway, war had set everyone back. He brushed off the idea that Germany was a real threat to America because of its smaller size and population, though the Nazis were already trying to build an empire. Germany used plenty of economic warfare tactics before and during the war. In pre-war Germany, the Nazis came to power during a deep economic crisis, then started controlling imports and the whole economy. If Nazi Germany had kept that up, there was a chance they'd try to hit the U.S. through money, not just bombs. Germany already used economic espionage like Operation Bernhard, where Nazi agents tried to crash the British economy by flooding it with counterfeit bills. The same kind of tactics could have been aimed at America if the Nazis ever had the reach.